I remember reading the meditative lessons of St. Ignatius Loyola years ago, and he wrote that out of an experience that he had when he became deathly ill as a young man and almost died. And in retrospect, he said, that was the best thing that ever happened to me because it took him deep. I think he was probably deep anyhow, but it took him into places, as it did with Jung in his own crisis. So these places where pathology enters, and we don't need Jim Hillman, God bless him, and thank you, Jim, for writing that, to know that when we suffer pathology, something big starts to shift in us.
If I can circle back to some things you were saying earlier, from a point of view from a linear point of view, depression and problematic periods in our life are just purely negative from a linear point of view. But if you appreciate poesis and process, then the darkest and most difficult parts of our lives can become part of a story, can become part of our growth process, and they often are. But it takes a point of view that's not simply linear or not simply APA
Right.
to appreciate that. And so I found one quote that seems to be maybe a peak of what you're talking about, and from Hillman's words. So I began by examining various psychological syndromes as if they were mythical enactments, as if they were ways in which the soul is my medic of an archetypal pattern. Mm-hmm. And I think that's...
And beautiful, and you touched two as if clauses.
Yeah.
Because Weihinger not only influenced Jung, Weihinger is cited several times. I don't want to overdo it, but several times in revisioning. There's something about that as-ifness that lets us be fictions with approval. It's not like, well, you're lying. No, we can't help being partly narrative. Mm-hmm. And when we are, it's not linear. It's more like a spiral.
Or a labyrinth.
Yeah. The geometry changes from that kind of egoic cause-effect linear.
Must put foot forward.
Yes, and there it is. But when we go to the as-if world, then we start moving in different psychological and poetic ways.
Yeah.
Yes, and music and...
I hate to throw another element into the mix, especially because we're running short on time here.
Oh,
but I'm going to throw this out anyway, and let's just say we have about 5 to 7 minutes left.
Okay.
Where does truth fall into the mix?
Uppercase, lowercase.
Okay, and now, all right, now define for me the difference between uppercase and lowercase.
Well, the uppercase truth would be a kind of absolute, and a lowercase truth, that would be
the fundamentalism aspect.
Yes,
okay.
and I don't want to discard the idea that there are certain things ontologically present, metaphysically palpable, that are in fact capital T truths. Otherwise, I'd find myself as a freewheeling relativist, and I don't think I am. And maybe I have the Ursuline nuns in 8 years of grade school to thank or curse for that. But I think we make our truths through the myths that we become more cognizant of, more conscious of. And so a hamburger patty may be the truth for me, and the sacredness of that same cow would be the truth for you. Am I wrong to eat what you worship? Well, then, see, that opens up the huge thing. Well, it depends on context. Well, what myth, what collective myth do you come out of? How did you get there?
I like the contextual statement of, I think it was Paul who said in that aspect, don't do something that will cause another to stumble. Doesn't mean you can't eat a hamburger,
right,
but don't do it in such a way that interferes with another's path, if you will.
Fair enough.
And that's one of the things I think that I have learned over the years is, and it's been a hard lesson because I've gone up against a lot of religious folks and asked some of the really hard questions, and a lot of the answers didn't make sense to me. And so I challenged and I challenged and I challenged. And then I realized that, okay, it's great to ask the questions, but you don't have to try to beat the other guy up to try to convince them that they're wrong because your thought process is going in a different direction.
Yeah, so much time.
Hold to your thought process and continue to work on it.
Yes.
And then maybe even open up a little bit to trying to understand where they're coming from.
Yeah.
And that makes a huge difference.
Huge difference is right.
Right. Before we wrap up our program, and again, we are getting close on time, I want to remind our listeners, you are listening to Tell Me Your Story. We are talking about Mythosophia, entertaining the depths of myth and wisdom. We're here with Dennis Slattery and also with Will Lynn, who will be back with us again next month, the last Saturday or Sunday in February, and each month thereafter, as we put together 12 programs in the light of Mythosophia. And again, if you're interested in finding out more, the title of the book is Writing Mythology, Mythological Writing.
Writing Myth.
Mythic writing.
Yes.
Writing myth, mythic writing. And again, the author is our guest, Dennis Slattery. And before we wrap up the program, I have 3 final questions for you that I always ask on this program. I've asked Will the same 3 questions, and we'll start with the first one, which is always a good place to start.
Yeah.
Who is Dennis Slattery?
Dennis Slattery is an Irish-American writer, sometimes full of more blarney than he's worth, who's been riding motorcycles for 45 years and has a wonderful biker babe wife who loves to ride the Harley Electric Glide Classic with him and who loves being a father and loves being a grandfather to 2 beautiful granddaughters.
What is it that you hope to or want to achieve through the work that you're doing now?
Yeah, good question. I give writing retreats around the country, and I've given them in Italy and Switzerland. I love presenting these, often through this book. Actually, the book is a consequence of doing it, so that people begin to see, grasp more fully, and love the narratives that they are. Hugely important for me to continue to try to do that.
And how powerful are we as human beings?
I think we're the most fragile things on the planet, the most dangerous thing on the planet, and I think our power is almost approaching infinity, and that may be our greatest shadow.
Well, I have to say that I always hate for these kinds of programs to come to an end. And we're going to have to somehow make a way to have him back on the program again in the near future. And Will, thank you for sharing this time with me.
Good job.
This has been great.
Thank you, Dennis.
Good job.
I'm Richard Dugan. This has been Tell Me Your Story, New Paradigms for a New World. Mythosophia, entertaining the depths of myth and wisdom. Again, facebook.com/Mythosophia if you would like to get more information about what we're talking about, as well as see the videos that will be available. And until next time, I'm Richard Dugan. Love to Lal.